Welcome, everyone. Another episode of Back and Forth. Kevin and I are ready to go. We're talking a number of topics today, including a fun lightning round. You can see it on the bottom there, but we're kicking off with what will it take for the markets to rally? A great discussion coming up. You want to stick around.
Yes, today we talk on a variety of different topics. And as you mentioned, market rebounding is a big one because everybody wants to know, when is it going to happen? I need to know now because I'm tired of watching things move down or sideways. So if you want to catch this video or any other back and forths or financial 15s, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's easy, quick, and you'll get lots of great content. Or like us on Facebook. And most importantly, go to our website at beckerorr.com. You will find everything there you need on the financial situation, as well as any of the lightning round questions that we've had previously. So today, Clint, we want to start off talking about what is it going to take for the market to rebound? Are we waiting for this for months, years, or is it going to happen tomorrow?
Time frame's always difficult. If we could tell you, it's going to be Tuesday of next week, life would be easy. We'd all just invest on that day and everything would go up. But we can paint the scene of what that environment has to look like, right? And we can start off, at least in my mind, you got to talk about the US dollar in this environment if you're going to be talking about anything happening to a positive degree. Because you have, I just learned this the other day, people call it the doom loop of the US dollar. It's a quite the dire term, the doom loop. US dollar strengthens. Then you have economic conditions in other countries that could be deteriorating partly due to that. But because their deterioration, the US dollar, relatively speaking, gets stronger. So you get this cycle that can happen and you can have an impact on markets. This is done by All-Star Charts. You can see the recent performance. The bottom graph, US dollar going up. Top graph is actually looking at the New York Stock Exchange going down. A pretty good correlation there, negative correlation, strong dollar leading partly to weak markets. But we know why the dollar is strong, right? It's not happening in a vacuum. There's so many other factors playing into it. I'm just saying, if you got to focus on one thing, a weaker US dollar would be a good thing for markets.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and then again, we've had this over time and changes again. I mean, back in the 70s, it was gold. Recently, it's been Bitcoin. Everything says, well, there's going to be new standards that go on. But at the end of the day, everybody gravitates towards the US dollar. It is the strongest currency in the world. And if you're in fear, I don't want to own stocks, I don't want to own bonds or anything else, I will own US dollars. US dollars have a very good value to them. And you're right, as the US dollar goes up, now every other country in the world, it is more expensive to buy anything based on that US dollar scenario. So, of course, markets don't rebound really quickly based on that. You have to have the US dollar start to go the other way so everything else comes into that sort of play. So you're correct. I think that's a huge factor to look at for when we're going to get that. So I think when we see the US dollar starting to go down a little bit more, we may have a little bit more confidence on markets rebounding.
Yeah, and it's all related, right? Because when would the US dollar go down? Well, when the central banks stop increasing interest rates, in the US, the Fed. But when's the Fed going to stop increasing interest rates? So probably when they have inflation under control, or they feel like they have inflation under control. So it's all tying together, right? I'm just giving you one metric so it's easier to follow. But that's the big question, right? When is inflation, quote unquote, peak? And then when do the central banks say, all right, we've done enough. We think we've got enough evidence. So when inflation's peaked, we're hitting the pause button on the rate cycle. I don't know when that happens, but it's all probably going to be connected. And you'd likely see a weaker US dollar when that event occurs. In my mind, that's probably the catalyst.
Yep, I think you're exactly right. Everything is tied together in that. I mean, basic economics 101 shows that these things are all in play together. And as we've seen beforehand, if you decide to stop interest rates, if other places have higher interest rates than what the US does, you're going to find US dollars flowing out to go into something that's going to pay them more in another currency because they're going to make more money off of it that way. So again, all these things are tied together, and it's definitely something that we have to look at for how we're going to find when that market rebounds. And you're right, inflation tends to be that big one. As soon as we said, well, it's peak, it's going to start coming down from there, you stop the interest rate rises, you probably get the markets to go because they're leading indicators.
Absolutely. And related to that, just a quick chart here, because last time I had very high inflation, not saying this time is like last time, there's definitely some differences. But the last time we did have high inflation, you have to go back a couple of decades. But what stopped at that point was what you just talked about. Now, this is going all the way back to the 80s. And you have to remember, Paul Volcker was the head of the Federal Reserve, the chair of the Reserve. So it'd be similar to Jerome Powell in today's terms. The green line there is the S&P 500, the stock market. And you can see it absolutely took off when he said there's growing evidence that the inflationary momentum has been broken. That's Fed speak. They always talk in code, but essentially it's them saying, all clear, we got inflation under control. And the stock market absolutely ripped, not just for weeks and months, but you can see it turned into a couple of year-long rally. Now, this different environment, not exactly like it was in the 70s and 80s, but I think you'd have a similar catalyst that once they say there's evidence that inflation is slowing or peaked, you'd probably see a similar rally out the other end.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And basically, you're going to see that scenario, right? All of a sudden, if you decide that prices are not going to consistently increase by that percentage and everything's going to start to come down or flatline for a while, more people will spend the money. All of a sudden, the economy starts moving up. Everything goes along with it that way. So you're right. I think we've done that with the market rebound. But again, when we're talking inflation, when we're talking, will it rebound? How do we deal with this? Interest rates. And we want to find out, Clint, how high do we think interest rates will go?
Yeah, I don't think we're done. I think there's more room to move in this rate cycle. The U.S. meets next week, I believe, for their central bank. They're likely going to increase rates there. Both Canada and U.S. take a pause in August, only because they don't meet in August. But when they meet again in September, I have a feeling both central banks will probably raise again in September, and then they might hit the pause button. At least in my mind, that could be a logical time for to slow down the rate hikes, or at least evaluate kind of the impact of the rate hikes. So I think we have more room to run. Are we going to see 7, 8, 9% prime rate in terms of this cycle? I don't think so. That's probably a little extreme, a low probability event. More probable is if you add another, 1% or 1 and a bit percent on the current prime rate, that could be a logical peak for this cycle's interest rates. Are you on the same page?
Yeah, I would agree with that exactly. I mean, it started slow, a quarter point here, then a half point, then 75 basis points in the U.S., then a full point in Canada. So they've gotten much more aggressive, much quicker because they want to rein inflation in faster. It's none of this, we'll wait and see because that can lead for a long time. But again, unsimilar to sort of the 80s scenario where you had those rapid rises and big numbers that went on. It's slightly different this time because I think a lot of it is we've had a huge run. I mean, in Canada, you've gone from 0.25 to 2.5, which is significantly huge, even though the interest rate is low. So I don't think we're going to even get close to 5 or even over 5 because all of a sudden now you also have tons of government debt out there, not only in Canada, but globally, and they have to pay interest on this. So the higher they increase that, now the governments have to come up with more payments. So there's only so high that you can go to try and control everything before it doesn't work out as well going forward. And you start to kill everything if you go over a certain interest rate. So they will go higher, but I think that they'll be within a range, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, and I agree. A repeat of the 80s probably not likely, just given our debt scenario, both for consumers as well as the government. So I don't think we'll get to that peak. I don't think we need to get to that peak for it to have a similar impact on demand destruction. But let's go through some fun here, Kevin. Let's move into the lightning round. We'll do a couple of questions each off the cuff. Right. I've not told you my questions. You have not told me yours. So this will be initial reactions. Do you want me to get things started, or do you want to lead off? What do you feel?
No, you go. I'm all set, ready. We'll see how I can answer.
All right. I'm gonna give you an easy one, a softball to start us off. We'll talk Bombers, talk about the Blue Bombers, undefeated, 6 in a row, great start to the season, but likely they won't have an undefeated season. So who is going to be their first loss?
Ooh, that's going to be an interesting one. Now, the big factor is they've got 3 on the road coming up before they come back home. Will they come home undefeated? I'm not sure. I think they will beat the Elks this week, but I have a feeling that the week after that, they are going to take their first loss of the season. The perfect season, it's always nice to think of, and you always wish it's there, but it hasn't ever happened, and I do not believe it's going to happen this year. So I think if the Bombers start 7-0, that's a good enough start. You can have 1 loss after that. So yes, I think they will lose on the road coming in the next 3 before they come home.
Yeah, my only example of perfect season was in the NFL when the Patriots attempted it and then lost in the Super Bowl. So I'd rather they lose now and win the Grey Cup.
Exactly.
There. Financial question for you. We talked about rates. Federal Reserve, they have their meeting next week, July 26, 27. Did they do 75 basis points or 100? How high is that rate hike?
Yes. Now, that's always one that's interesting. A week ago, I probably would have gone along with 100 basis points, but I think that there's been enough out there coming out of Fed Chairman Powell to say that, look, we do believe this is a problem. We will continue to raise rates. We are going to attack it, but I think he sticks to that 75 basis point scenario. I do not think he goes the full point. And I think a lot of it's going to have to do with their rationale for they are close to or not if at peak inflation right now. So 75 basis points, I'm not going higher.
All righty. I'll finish off with some Marvel here of Thor: Love and Thunder. We both saw it over the weekend. Not the best of the Thors, but it is doing fairly well at the box office. Crossed 500 million. Does it surpass Thor 3 Ragnarok, which was 853 million? Does it beat that?
I'm going out on the limb and saying, no, it won't. I do not believe it will. And I guess the biggest reason for me is because the drop off between week 1 and week 2 was the biggest we've ever seen for a Marvel movie. So my assumption is there are going to be more summer films coming out. People are going to take a look at it. I think that Thor 4 is going to finish worse than Thor 3.
Yeah, I mean, even over 500 mil, that's not necessarily a bad tally at the box office, but not quite the same height of the prior movie. We'll switch gears here. I'll jump in the hot seat, and you can fire away with a couple of questions.
All right, so the first one I want to talk, you talk Bombers, summer, it's great, and I don't want to get into this yet because hockey season's a little ways away yet, but do we see the Winnipeg Jets trading either Scheifele, Wheeler, or Dubois before the season starts?
I think Dubois is on the chopping block. They got to make a big move. I don't think they move Scheifele or Wheeler, so I do think Dubois could be on his way out. What they get in return, I don't know, but I think that could be the trade to be made before the season starts.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. And again, it's been hot topic, so we have to look at it that way. Question number 2 is going to deal with our market rebound sort of scenario. We are basically halfway through the 2022 season, or it's the season, 2022 year, should I say. We are presently at roughly 19,000 on the TSX. Do we end the year higher than that?
Higher than where we are now? Yes. I do think you see a better second half than the first half. I do think you see a rally towards the end of the year. So I'd say we're end higher than we are now. I think we end on a high note.
Perfect. I always love hearing those sort of scenarios. And if I have to take a look for a third question, I got a variety of things here that are going on, but I am going to stick with Bitcoin today, just dealing with it. Bitcoin has been all over the map, and what we've seen is that it's gone below 20, it's gone above 20. Do we see 30,000 before we see 10, or is it vice versa?
Oh, 30 before 10. I do think you'll see 30 before 10, but I think there's a lot of resistance at 30,000. I think Bitcoin is forming a base here. It's a high-risk asset, a high-beta asset, and if you do see a bit of a turnaround, a little bit of a rally in the markets, I think Bitcoin and cryptos will start to run, but Bitcoin will likely hit some resistance to that 30,000 zone, but I think it hits 30 before 10. I think the next move likely higher for Bitcoin.
Beautiful. Yeah, that solves everything that I've had for today, so I think we've answered a few questions, giving you a little bit to think about. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, you want to know anything more about the Bombers, the Jets, interest rates, what Clint's predictions are for everything else going forward in the market, please visit us with chatwithclintonandkevin.com. We're more than happy to answer those questions, anything else you have on the financial front as well. We've really enjoyed doing this for you, so I'm out for the rest of the day, and that's about all I can think of.
I think that covers it. Take care. Stay safe. We'll be back again soon.